Okay, welcome back everybody, Baruch Hashem, as we are looking forward to forge on. I was going around taking a poll, asking people if you could, in theory, press a button now and go back to the first night of Slichas. I know for some that maybe Rosh Chodesh El. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about coming in 1 o'clock in the morning, saying Slichas. You can do it all over again. At this given moment, would you do it again? Or would you just go on with it? This is where I'm up to.
Maybe you're alive, I'd do it.
Uncle Yankel, what would you do? Would you go back?
My Rabbi, yeah.
You would go back?
Oh, well, I can find him, he's not alive.
Okay. Anyone else? How many people would go back if you had a choice? Would you go back to the first night of Slichas? I just say, let me do it again, or do we pick it up and go here? All right, so while you're thinking about that, being that it's only a theoretical question because we have no way of going back, so let's understand. That's besides, I said, for Rebbeim that have to go back to teach tomorrow morning. I know what the answer is then. But let's go back to the basic question, the idea that it gets to a certain point where life has to go on. It is after the Yom Tovim, the winter is fast and coming, unless you're in Australia, the summer is fast and coming. But either way, it's time to move on. It's not always easy to move on. It's not always easy to take, accept reality and say, gegangen weiter. They say that in Eretz Yisrael. Someone told me this. That they stopped, some people, they kept naming children after Rebbe Yoshev, Schachter Tzadik L'Vrach, and Yosef Shalom, and then some people stopped doing it because they realized that the babies were waking up at 2:30 and they were up the entire night till the morning. So, but I think, like in every Milsa de Vedichas, there's a little bit of truth to it. You know, we want to name our kids after a tzaddik, but once they start becoming tzaddikim, we say, wait a second, I'm not ready for this. He should be up the entire night. We want bracha, but when the bracha really comes, are we ready for it? So everyone got a portion. This Rosh Hashanah, Seres Yemei Tshuva, Yom Kippur, Shana Rabbah, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah. You and I, none of us are the same people that we were last year. There's an allotment of talent, of money, of power that we got. But along with that comes responsibility, comes a certain amount of jealousy, comes a certain amount of demands. The Rabbi Hashem gave us tremendous new kaiches. The question is, are we ready to deal with those new kaiches as the year moves on? I heard a cute thing in the shul. You know, Simchas Torah, everybody gets aliyahs. So it takes a long time. So people have different minhagim, how they do things. So in some shuls, they have all the kehanim, they move them to one corner. They move all the Levim to one corner and all the Yisraelim to a different corner. It kind of makes it easier. This way you don't have to, right. So you would go to a special Kaihanim, go to special corners, right. So this Gabba, he called out like this. All Kaihanim, that corner. He says, all Levim, that corner. He says, all the Bacharim to that corner. He says, all those that only need Shishi, that corner over there. Okay? There's just one Shishi after the other. By the way, there is no Shishi on Simchas Torah, but okay. All those that go off to there. After Yom Tif, we received our rations, so to speak. We received our ammunitions. And now it's time to move on. And moving on requires a certain amount of kayach. Tonight's the yard site, two very big yard sites, the Kedushas Levi of Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev and the Chassam Sofer. Well, there's a story. This is not your typical Kedushas Levi story, but I think that there's a tremendous lesson over here as it applies to what we're saying. This man earned 900 ruble, and the 900 ruble did not come easy to him. The 900 ruble came as a fulfillment truly of the Zeyas Apecha Toichel Lechem, and he was away from his family for many years, and he's on his way back, and he notices from his peripheral vision a sign, it's a little bit of an arrow that points and says Barditchev. He says, listen, I was away so long, and I'm now returning home. Should I perhaps go into the Heilige Barditcheva and ask him for a bracha?
Anyway.
I'm here already. No, I may as well go. So he went and he stood there, and the Barditcheva looked at him, and the Kedushas Levi said that, he says, some people are smart. They know what to do with their money. And there is no smarter thing, there's no more intelligent thing you can do with your money. There's nothing more than to purchase chachma with it. And for 300 ruble, I can give you a lot of chachma. To marry off Kala. So this guy's like 300 ruble, that's 30% of what I was working on. This was not very easy. 300 ruble, that's like a lot of money. I mean, that's all I got, right? But some of us don't have much more than 300 ruble, right? So here I am, but he said, the Berditchev is probably going to tell me reveal to me such an earth-shattering secret. He is going to be megala to me such a side that it's kedai, that it's worth it. So he lifted his hands and he turned to the Berditchev and said, here's the 300 ruble. And he's preparing himself that the Berditchev should be megala to him, the soidais, the raisa, the rabbanon, the secrets of heaven and earth. And the Berditchev told him, sometimes when you're at a crossroads and you're not sure if you should turn left or right, you go right. He said, fine. Now what about the great chachma you're going to tell me? He said, that was the great chachma that I told you. And he could not believe that he just lost 2 years of, I don't know how many years he was away. He almost went through the floor. He was about to turn right and right until he was faced in the opposite direction and then exit. And the Berditchev summoned him back. He said, all right, now he's going to tell him it was a joke, and he's going to tell him the whole thing. He said, that for another 300 ruble, he's going to be megala to him even more chachma. So the guy figured that what the Berditchev told him till now must have been a riddle. I mean, he couldn't have been serious. So, but if I don't give him the other 300 ruble, then I'm going to lose the first 300. So what they say, don't throw good money after bad or bad money after good. But he figured after what he's going to tell me now, then I'll understand the great secrets of the universe that have been unlocked, and I will understand why this was worth all the riches in the world. So with very trembling hands, he took out the other 300, remaining him only with 3, and he gave it to the Berditchev, and the Berditchev told him, I want to tell you a klal in life. He said, if there's a very young wife, and an old husband, you should know that is close to death. Right. But what about the chachma that you're going to tell me? That's supposed to reveal to me the inyan of turning right. And suddenly he realized that was the chachma. And now only thing he has charata on is for not turning right and leaving right away. And now he only has 300 ruble. He asked the chassidim if rebbes give refunds. They said no. That's it. It's COD, cash on purchase. That's the way it is. So he turns around and he wants to high heel out of there. He has had enough of this. He cannot believe, why did he have to come here? And the Berditchev calls him back. He did not want to come. The Chassidim suggested that he come back. They did so by lifting him and placing him in front of the Rebbe. And he said to him that for another 300 ruble, then you're really gonna acquire wisdom. He says, like the first 2? He says, yeah. Get out of here. And but he had no choice. And again, he made the cheshbon that by giving the last 300, it'll tell him shot in the first. So Mamela, somehow his pockets are now empty, and he gives everything. And he's waiting to see what the Berditchev is going to say. And he's going through the floor, and the Heilige Berditchev says to him, never assume things at face value, even if you see it with your own eyes. Right. And therefore, no therefore. No comma, no equal, no but, atkan, end, over. Paragraph, over. Right. He will never assume anymore when someone tells him another story about a Rebbe that, right. A lot of things he won't assume now at face value. He was once again lifted, and he left Berditchev in a very, very confused state, to say the least. And so he travels on, and suddenly behind him he hears horses. And he turns around and he notices a bunch of bandits coming his way. This is great. This is just his day. And he dives into a cactus bush or something on the corner. The bandits zoom by him, and he continues on his way. And when he reaches a crossroads, again he hears horses coming behind him. And this time he wasn't sure if it was the bandits, shkayach, if it was the police, or was the Berditchev's gaboyim. He wasn't sure which was better at this point. And he turns around, and it is the local sheriff. And the local sheriff grabs him. They said, listen, which way do they go? He said, who? And he pulls out his sword. He says, listen, we know Either you're part of them, or you reveal to us which way those bandits went. Right now. Right or left. If you don't tell us, if you mislead us, you give us wrong information, we'll kill you. We'll kill you, we'll consider you an accessory to these criminals. Now, right now. Right or left. He realizes his life is at stake over this sheriff is like, desperate. And he's like, what did the Berditchever tell him? And he goes, right or left? He goes, a young wife and an old man is half a death. Right or left? Don't assume things unless you see it. When you stop babbling, right or left? He goes, the first thing, you have a choice, right or left. He goes, right. And so one of the sheriff's deputies stays by to hold on to him just to make sure it's right. And the whole cavalry takes off to the right. And a while later, they come back with the person in the bandits in chains, and they call him over, and they drag him into the police station. He says, "Oh no, now what's going to happen?" And they inform him, and he's ready that he's had it. He is going to scream his head off. He's had enough tonight. No one's going to take advantage of him. And they inform him that there was a reward. Anyone who helps to lead to the capture of these criminals, and here's 500 ruble. And he said, "Absolutely not." What? 500 ruble? Oh, okay. No. Gamzul Taiva, what do you do, But he takes the 500 ruble and he's off. Feeling a little bit better about himself. He comes to an inn, and in the inn he can't help but notice elderly gentleman, taking him in, and he's calling to his wife, and he notices a tremendous disparity over there in the years, and he begins to think about the second thing. And he's in bed at night, tossing and turning, and he says, "No, the Berditchever was telling me something." And he looks out the window, he sees the wife out there, and she's whispering to a bunch of people that are going back and forth. He's trying to think, right, young wife, old man, death, And I guess that sheriff's deputy must have given him his cell number or something, because he quickly contacted him and says he thinks something is amiss. And sure enough, she apparently married him only for the Yerusha, for the inheritance, and she hired a bunch of people to finish him off that night. And just as they were about to lower the hatchet, in walked in the sheriff's deputies and arrested that person. And he was rewarded 500 ruble by the man. I guess that's how much he felt his life was worth. But he was rewarded 500 ruble. Another story that somebody was stopped by a mugger. He threw him down. He said, "Let's go, cash or life?" He goes, "You take a check?" He goes, "No, I don't know you. Why should I take your check?" All right, so I don't know what they thought that his money was worth. They gave him 500 rubles, so he's now 1,000 ruble. He's already 100 ruble ahead, and he comes home. Now, mind you, he has been away many, many years. And he comes home, and he looks through the window of his apartment, and he sees his wife sitting there with a young man. They're just sitting by the table talking, but already he's inflamed with envy and rage. And in his passion, he's about to pull out his sword, and all of a sudden he stops and he thinks about the third thing that the Berditchever said, which was, no assumptions, even if you see it with your own eyes. And he walked in and he told his wife, "You better have a good explanation. Who is this person?" He said, "Who is him? You can see in his genes. This is a terrible person. Who is he?" She explained that this is his son. She explained to him, "This is your son. He left when he was a small boy, and he realized that he was older sitting with his mother." So at that point, he realized what the Berditchever had saved him in so many different ways. There are so many disappointments in our life that we just don't chap that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is talking to us. That what we need to do is just listen. Listen. Nothing happens by chance. Agmas Nefesh does not happen by chance. Now today is, or was, I should rather say, was Isru Chag. What does the word Isru Chag mean? Isru means sometimes tied. Usr, something is usr, it's prohibited, it's tied. Maaser is a jail. Isru Chag means we're still tied to the Yom Tov. Ba'avoisa. Ba'avoisa means the big, thick behemoths. Or some tight, thick chains. At Karnais HaMizbeach, if you accept the matzav, that in Yom Tov we were given advice, we may not be zaycha to stand before a tzaddik who actually tells us things, but we went through certain emotional changes this Yom Tov. We went through certain experiences. We went through certain nisyonos. And if you listen to what you heard, to what you learned on Yom Tov, and you understand that somehow this applies to us at the crossroads throughout the winter, so Ad Karnais HaMizbeach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers that as if you were makriv karbonos on the Mizbeach. The Rashab said about Parasha Bereishit that it is connected, and many Chassidish Svarim say, that Parasha Bereishit is still connected to the Yom Tov. that Parasha Bereishit is when you take all the koiches you got from Yom Tov, and we want to see now. Go! So the Rashab said, a mashal, you have the most powerful horses in the world. You just got as a gift. But the trick is you have to connect them to your wagon. Right? All the comedy skits, the horses take off and the wagon is left behind. You have to connect it to the wagon. He says, Parasha Bereishit is taking all of the koiches that we accumulated on Yom Tov and connecting it to the horse. The Tzemach Tzedek said, you know what Parasha Bereishit says? The minig is that we take a 3-year-old, we wrap him in a talis, and we bring him to Cheder, and he comes to his Rabbi, and the Rabbi says the Aleph Beis with him. We take him by hand. That is Parasha Bereishit. Klal Yisrael takes all of Klal Yisrael, brings them to Cheder, and says, are you willing to go on? Are you willing to say whatever happened in your life happened? That's it. You can't go back. I gave you new koiches on Yom Tov. Pick yourself up and move. Kids are very excited. They talk about when they're upsharing, when they turn 3 years old. They talk about the pekel. But when the day comes and you bring them to Cheder, they get very scared. And sometimes as the new year begins, we're not so brave. We're running out of the koiches. And we're not willing to accept the koiches. The Chafetz Chaim, when people used to come to him to try to not be indoctrinated into the Polish army, which for a Jew at that time in World War I was almost instant death. The question was whether he stabbed from the front or from behind. So Bachram used to come to the Chafetz Chaim for a bracha. And the Chafetz Chaim wrote a sefer for Jewish soldiers. And he deals with some unpleasant things, like writing a last-minute tzavah, and davening in a bridge Shmon Esrei, and how to deal with the tray for food, and so on. It's a comprehensive sefer. It's called Machne Yisrael.
Right.
And so the Chafetz Chaim, sometimes he would give the sefer to a bacher that came to ask for a bracha. And you knew if you got the sefer, you were in trouble. You knew that if you got the sefer, that was not good news. But it was good news, because the Chafetz Chaim was, in reality, was giving you the bracha, was giving you the kaiches to be able to endure. So an old Yid once told me a story of someone, he says he remembers his father told him, I don't know if he himself or his father told him, that he was standing there once, and this bacher came and asked for a bracha, and the Chafetz Chaim gave him the sefer, and he turned around, he threw the sefer back on the table. He says that didn't help. He was still indoctrinated. The Chafetz Chaim, but sometimes we want to blame the messenger, and the Rabbi Hashem is giving us the kaiches. So I heard this story from Rabbi Yisrael Spinner, who heard it from, he told me, he told us in class when he was my Rebbe, that he heard it from the Baldover himself, that he was a kid, his father was a big maskel into the Askola, and he went the opposite. The traffic was not traveling in that direction. He went to Radin, he learned in Radin, and when he got a letter to show up, to the Polish army, Polish Tsarist army, he says he's going to the Chafetz Chaim for a bracha. I'm going to go to the Chafetz Chaim for a bracha. And his father was not so excited about it. His father said, I spoke to the doctors, they took care of it, you don't have to go for a bracha. He says, no, I'm going to go to the Chafetz Chaim for a bracha. So he went, and he said to the Chafetz Chaim, his father arranged it with the doctor that he flunks the medical, which was a common practice in those days. And the Chafetz Chaim told him, what's the Schlechter meken schießen? He says, what's so bad if you know how to shoot? It didn't sound like it was a bracha to get out. So the boy was taken aback, he was aghast, and he said, don't worry about it, he's an old man, doesn't know what he's talking about, come on, we spoke to the doctor. The doctor calls him in, and the doctor was prepaid, shall we say, beforehand, and there was a very big copay for this doctor, and he called him in and said, don't worry about it. He said, he tells him, put your hand over one eye, read the chart. He says, put your hand over the other eye, keep both hands over your eyes, and read the chart. Can't do it, huh? Okay, serious eye problems, gave him some shoe polish to drink, and the guy was clutching his stomach. He said, serious stomach problems, and gave him a swarm shank to hold, told him to stand on the scale, whatever the system was. And just as he's about to write him off as being overweight and not being able to see and not being able to hear, all of a sudden in walked the big general. And he looked at this kid who was very daunting, 6'5", and broad-shouldered, and he said, "Let me see the report on him." And the doctor quickly shuffled that report into the trash can and said, "I didn't have a chance to write it yet." So what's this blind guy that can't get up onto a scale? That was the guy that was here before. He says, "Where is he? He's so sick they had to carry him on a stretcher." Not him. This guy is. So he told him, "Listen, the general walked in. There's nothing I can do." And his father felt there was a klala from the Chafetz Chaim. Yeah. And he felt, it makes sense. I had it all down packed, and here I got caught. So he went to war, and he was given, and he was made in charge of, his job was to put together machine guns under open fire, which isn't such a geschmack kazach. And he began to do it. And he had many close calls during his time. It almost made it, almost didn't make it. It was not a very geschmack hazach. But he survived the war. Came back broken and smashed and hurt and traumatized, but he survived the war. His father, to his dying day, never forgave the Chafetz Chaim.
How do you know it was a clover?
Fast forward, that's the father felt. The boy didn't think that way. Fast forward, World War II, he's in the ghetto, and he and a couple of people snake their way out of the ghetto and run into the woods, and they're captured by a bunch of partisans. And the partisan says, we have no need for Jews for extra baggage, and they're about to line them up and shoot them. And he points to a broken machine gun on the floor, and he says, I can fix that. And they didn't believe him. He said, let me try. And he did. And he picked it up and pointed it at them and said, want me to test it now? He said, no, we believe you. They said, you're good. They said, we'll let you stay. He said, let me stay? If you let me stay, everyone else has to stay as well. Well, they said, you're too valuable to give up, and as a result, he and all those people would live through the war. And all have generations. And maybe today there are thousands of Einiklach. And now we see that it's not a klal. But we don't always realize that in life. In our life, sometimes there's a gitza ken shisen, and we don't want to accept it. We don't want to accept the baby waking up at 2:30. It's not what I meant. You gave the baby the name, we don't want to accept it. So, Isru Chag B'Avaisim, we're tied to the Yantiv, and sometimes it weighs us down. But you should know at Karnais HaMizbeach. So, David, now we know, by Simchas Beis HaSheva, everyone does different things, by Simchas Beis HaSheva, you're supposed to say the Shir HaMalos, right? The 15 Shir HaMalos. And interestingly enough, we say it by Simchas Beis HaSheva, and some people start saying the 15 Shir HaMalos when? Shabbos, after Mincha, they say Baruch Nafshi and the 15 Shir HaMalos, until Pesach when you start saying Pirkei Avos. And we start from this week and on. And what is the inyan? So David HaMelech, he built the foundation to the Beis HaMikdash. He could not build the Beis HaMikdash proper, but he built the foundation to the Beis HaMikdash, which is a tremendous Mesiras Nefesh, knowing he won't be able to build the Beis HaMikdash because he spilled blood. Why did he spill blood? In defense of Klal Yisrael, but still he had to accept it. So David says, and I'll do what I have to do. And he's digging the foundation. And what was the purpose of the foundation? So that the water and the wine pouring into the Mizbeach should be able to go into the core of the earth. So he's digging real deep down, and he finds a piece of clay. And the piece of clay warns him, he says, don't lift me, because I am protecting the subterranean waters from shooting up and drowning the world. You think global warming started now. And David HaMelech says to this piece of clay, and he thought it was a Ma'aseh Satan, so he lifts it, and the water starts rising, and he realizes now that the entire water world is going to be submerged. And here comes Mabel episode 2. And he begins to cry and scream, and he says, if anyone has an eitzah for me and doesn't give me the eitzah, he should be strangled. Now Achitophel was there, and Achitophel did have an eitzah, but he was thinking, let David drown, and meanwhile he'll become king. Which is a shayla. If David drowns, how does he become king? He's going to drown also, right? So the Mefarshim explained, knowing David, he's going to stand on top of the clay. In other words, he'll be the first to drown. Try to get everyone else to learn. But once he heard the klala, so he told him that you write Hashem's name and put it down on the thing, and the water will stop. Hashem's name will be erased. But we learned from Saita that Hashem allows his name to be erased for Shalom Bayis. So Kal V'chomer, Hashem allows his name to be erased to maintain the world. So he did so, and it was a close call. But by now the water had gone down so little. Here's the biggest pella. So David said, if I can lift the water a little bit, it would make the irrigation of the world so much easier. So he said the 15 Shir HaMa'alois, Shir, the song HaMa'alois of lifting, and each time the water went up a little bit higher, which is an amazing thing, because you think about this. You would think that here he is, he's digging the foundation of the Beis HaMikdash, the entire world was almost submerged, he almost drowned. Like I would get me out of here. I have nothing to do with this anymore. I have no shaykhs to this. I'd run for the hills. And yet David is still here and says, what can I do to benefit the world under these circumstances? You know that story, this guy goes, he meets a prospective father-in-law, and the father-in-law faheres the living daylights out of him. Like from first grade through Beis Medrash, every single shiur he said, and asks him 1,000 questions, what he plans on doing, what he doesn't doing in the book, and he takes out, the father-in-law got a hold of his report cards from day one and is analyzing each and every one of them. And when he finishes, he says, okay, you passed. He says, maybe I passed. He says, but I'm leaving. He says, you don't want to marry my daughter? He says, nope. He says, well, so what are you going to get better? What kind of girl are you looking for now? He says, a Yisaima. That's what I'm looking for now, he says. Okay. He says, you would think that David HaMelech would want to be out of here, like after, what a close call. But he still is involved in the water and is actually engaged in bringing the water up. So the Iyun Yaakov explains that David HaMelech felt this is a pivotal time in the history of the world because he's laying the foundation of the Beis HaMikdash, and the Satan is always mekatrig at a pivotal time. Very often in our life, before we have the ultimate nechama in our life that we are waiting for, there's a major crisis. We don't always understand how this works. Sometimes I've heard it from people. He finally is becoming a chasna, something went. You have to deal with a crisis out of nowhere. They're finally expecting a child after who knows how many years they have to deal with a crisis. The Satan is mekatrik at a pivotal point in our life. And David HaMelech felt that the fact that the world was about to be drowned here is a siman that this was the makar of the Beis HaMikdash. And he had to fight through this. And what he was actually doing, as it is explained, when he lifted the water, was he was reversing to a certain degree the Chet Eitz Hadas. Because the Chet Eitz Hadas was Bezeyas HaPecha Teichel Lechem, you have to irrigate the land, and he was bringing the water closer, which is what he felt the Beis HaMikdash would do. Now, you have to realize that David HaMelech, this should have been, for any normal person, the greatest setback in his life. After all David went through, he's about to build the Beis HaMikdash, Hashem says, no, you can't build it. And David HaMelech overhears, Chazal tell us, people saying, when is David going to die so we can build the Beis HaMikdash already? And he was taken aback. And at one point he said, Kadosh Baruch Hu said, take my life, so build the Beis HaMikdash. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu said to David, what are you talking about? Kadosh Baruch Hu said to David that it's more sweet to me one night of you learning Torah than 1,000 carbon oilos that Shlomo HaMelech is going to be makar. That David HaMelech asked which day is he going to die, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu told him, I can't tell you, I can tell you only that it'll be on Shabbos. And he asked, according to another version of Chazal, he asked, let it be on Erev Shabbos, why should I die on Shabbos? I make a problem for people. So the Kadosh Baruch Hu said, night earlier? Why? One night of your Torah is worth to me more than 1,000 oilos. Says the Maral, what does it mean, a night of Torah? It means Torah when you're not in the mood of learning. It means after Yom Tov and getting on in life, when you're not in the mood of getting on with life. That's Torah Balayla, the battle with the Yetzer Hara. Reb Tzaddik says, we say, B'shach b'cha of kumecha. So b'shach b'cha means when you lay down, right? The whole night you're laying down. With kumecha is only when you get up. So b'shach b'cha is an ongoing process. You're constantly laying. If kumecha, you get up right away because it's machlekes b'sham and hill, but the pasuk pshat in the pasuk. So Reb Tzaddik says there's a battle with the Yetzer Hara that's a non-stop battle the entire night. Of kumecha, there's a different battle with the Yetzer Hara. You got to get out of bed. Once you get out of bed, you get the day going. Things are okay. Torah Balayla is the battle of B'shach B'cha. It's a battle of Yetzer Hara just doesn't stop. He's just ripping me from all sides. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu says to David HaMelech, you were bopped over the head so hard, and you can't build a Beis HaMikdash. So what do you say? You're going to build the foundation of the Beis HaMikdash? And you're building the foundation of the Beis HaMikdash, and the entire world goes, You're drowning us. And instead, you don't stop. Instead of saying, what are you doing to me? What are you messing me up like this? Instead, you read it as a power. Oh, let me lift the water closer to the world. Let me reverse the Chet Eitz Hadas. Your Mesiras Nefesh is worth 1,000 times more. So in this week's Sedra, what happens on day number 2? Kadosh Baruch Hu separates the water. And it's the first cry on this world. The water that is left down here on this world cries. It's the cry of separation. Very difficult cry when you're separated from something you don't want to be separated from. It's the pain of being relegated all the way on bottom. And what does the Kadosh Baruch Hu say to the crying water down here? Don't worry, water! It's going to come sukkos. We're going to take 3 lugan, a couple of ounces, and pour you into the Mizbeach. Oh, that's great. You know how much water was left down here in this world? 2/3 of the world is water. You have the Pacific Ocean, you have the Atlantic Ocean, you have the subterranean waters, and 3 lugan, a couple of ounces are going on the Mizbeach. So how does that help me? How does that help me? And the answer is that Kadosh Baruch Hu is saying to the water, you're down here, and you feel like you were rejected. You feel so ripped away from the ones that you love. That water went up. But you will understand that that Gimel Lugin that goes into the Mizbeach, that goes down to the core of the earth, which is David HaMelech's digging, the battle when there are setbacks, and you rebuild again. In a world of restriction, in a world of taiva, you keep on trying. That's Isruchag, my life. Be avoisim, ad karnes HaMizbeach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, that little bit of Mesiras Nefesh that's sitting on a subway and not looking at the advertisement, sitting at home and putting and closing the computer, turning around, that one shot at turning around is worth more than 1,000 carbon oilos. That's the most precious thing. At Karnes HaMizbeach, it goes down to the core of the earth. It reverses the Chet Eitz Hadas. The Eitz Hadas was Me'afar, he comes out of the earth and he returns to the dust. Where was the dust that Adam was created from? On the Mokim HaMikdash, on the Mizbeach. You're reversing death. You're reversing the Chet Eitz Hadas. In the world of truth, in the world of Tchias HaMesim, it is going to be this drop of water, this drop of Mesiras Nefesh, when you got hit over the head and humiliated, when you were so hurt, so pained, so lost, and you say, life is going to go on. You know, a guy gave me the ultimate compliment this week. The father came over to me. I go to school, I keep telling, we have this B'tachan series, and he goes, and I keep saying the story. So he says, you know, I was talking to my kid about B'tachan, and he mentioned your name. I felt so good. I said, what did the kid say? He said, leave me alone with those Fischel Schachter stories. So I said, well, that still feels very good to be synonymous with B'tachan. You know what I mean? It's a world we get hit so hard. We're slapped in the face. Look at this world. Look what how the world is unraveling so fast. Changes so fast. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is machlev as manim and mesader sakechov. You look at the presidential race. You know, it's a done deal. It's not a done deal. Polls this way, polls that way. All it's kind of complicated. At one point, everyone has to agree that this world is spinning by a higher force. It's not in our control. It's constantly changing. So we say Shir HaMalos during Sukkot. That's the Shir HaMalos as the water is rising. That's the Shir HaMalos of having attained our new kaiches. Once Sukkot is over, we start digging again. And once again, we're ready to say Shir HaMalos. So I heard this story from a Melech Biderman Zolzain Gezund. This is a great story. He says that the Kehillah had one esrig, and everybody came to the town to buy the esrig. So one individual went, and he said, you know, everyone had to put money into a pushka, and he didn't put money into the pushka. He didn't have. But when it came to benching esrig, he longed for that esrig. So he pushed himself over, and there was a big, husky gabbai standing over there. And the gabbai is holding the esrig. He said to him, you paid? He goes, no. Did you pay? No. He wants so badly that she's reaching for it. He says, you're not. I'm holding on to this. You are not going to shake the esrig. And he walks away, and he's in such pain that he turns around, and he literally runs over, and he sees the gabbai is not going to let go of it, so he lifts the whole gabbai and starts shaking him back and forth. You know what I mean? This way, that way.
Like a lulav.
Right. Like a lulav, right. They said he comes up to Shemayim after 120 years. The guy had many aveiros. But they saw that Mesiras Nefesh for the esrig. So they went, they put the weight of the esrig on the scale. The esrig doesn't weigh that much. So they went, they put the whole gabbai on the scale. Whoa! They said the mitzvah side of the scale went down big time. You know, it's those times in our life it looks like we are so rejected that we're willing, instead of, you know, we're willing to do anything to be able to somehow perform and connect. It's that weight, you know, that picks us up, that helps us through. Very interesting. There's this Bloomberg survey of prices of gas throughout the world, but it rated in a very interesting way. It rated 60 countries. Price per gallon, but price per gallon as it corresponds to the average income of the person. And in other words, and it says what's the amount of pain that it costs to fill up a tank. That's what it's trying to say. So, for example, Norway, it costs $10.19 regular a gallon, but in the list of the 60 countries, how much pain it is, it's only ranks 52. Because the average daily salary is $272 a day in Norway. He says Turkey is the average price per gallon is $9.41. That's if you don't get hit with a Syrian missile as you're filling up. But they rank number 7 in pain because the average Turkish salary is only $30. Right? He says Eretz Yisrael is $9.28 a gallon, but they rank 31. Venezuela is 9 cents a gallon. Okay? I mean, people travel to New Jersey. People start traveling to Venezuela. I'm not sure that makes sense. So they call it pain at the pump. It's a whole different halach. So it's very interesting. You look at numbers. Wow, so much money, so much money, so much money. But when you look at it in terms of how much pain it is to fill it up, it's a whole different order. And that's why we can't judge this world. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't, that's why it's schar mitzvah b'hayal maleka. And that's why you can't judge you can't judge mitzvah kala to mitzvah. We don't have no way of rating it. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu schar v'oinish is not based on the price of the mitzvah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu schar v'oinish is based on the pain. It's a different world. You can buy a big fancy esrog for $3,000, but you're chashav a guy. You walk into shul with this. There's no pain. Rav Bick Zechar Levracha used to say. He says, people line up around the corner to show me esrog. He says, I rarely see a pasla esrog. He says, hardly anyone shows up and asks me, tell me, I want to do this deal in business. Is it kosher? He says, and I rarely see kosher money. He said. He said, we look at mitzvahs and superstars and who are the heroes in Yiddishkeit. The Rebbeinu Shalom looks at it differently. Not chas v'shalom to suggest that if someone is respected, he's not respected, but it's in terms of Mesiras Nefesh. That piece of Gemara, when you come home and you have an assignment and you can sit by a computer and engage in whatever, at whatever level, and you run out of the house and slam the door behind you and come to yeshiva at night and sit with a chavrusa, do you know what that Gemara rates in Shemayim? When you're not in the mood of learning, when it's Torah B'Layla, and you open up a Gemara, Rabbi Shalom, I asked you, and I asked you, and I asked you, what did you tell me? What did I get? I lost my money, and I was told to turn to the right, and I was told, whatever you see is not real, things that I don't understand. Yeah, there's a time we're going to realize the greatness in that, and then no tefillah is wasted, and the answers that we got in Shemayim that seemed to us that we weren't answered are the great bracha. But from that time you get the advice from the Berditsheva until you get the reward money. To learn Torah and to continue davening at that moment that you are rated number one. The pain at the pump is different. Everyone's Nisayan to eat a piece of cheesecake is different. Everyone's Shalom Bayis Nisayan is different. Shmir Sanayim, you cross the threshold of your house. It's the weight of saying Shir HaMalos. And if you're lifting somebody else up in the course of doing that, that's a different world. So what did we finish saying? We read yesterday, that refers to what? Kriyas Yamsef and the Mon. Li'enei Kol Yisrael, and that's how the Torah ends, refers to such a lofty idea. The most intimate moment of Klal Yisrael. Li'enei Kol Yisrael. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do? Li'enei Kol Yisrael, says Rashi. Broke the Luchas. That's how the Torah ends. The breaking of the Luchas. Says the Chassam Sofer, Kodesh Baruch Hu's relationship with us comes in two ways. There are times in our life we see Kriyas Yamsef. There are times in our life we see the Man. And there are times in our life where we see the breaking of the Luchas. The breaking of the Luchas was more necessary for Klal Yisrael to be able to connect to Torah than anything else. To us it looks like the breaking of the Luchas. And the Umas Ha'olam says, the Chassam Sofer, today's the Yartzeit of Tarumos. They say, what? You didn't sin by the Egel, that's why you broke the Luchas. And that's the connection to Bereishis Bara Elokim. That from Bria Sa'olam, the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, you don't understand how I run this world. We can't have kindness because we don't understand. And that's why Simchas Torah we do the backwards Hagba. You don't understand what you're learning. You don't know who has the pain factor. I'll share with you a story which I've said, I don't know if I've said it mamish in this venue, but I know that you've heard it, and I don't want to say I promise, but I hope this is the last time for at least 6 months. Okay? So I think if you heard by now that I was in Australia, it's coming out of years already. The whole Australia is coming out of years already. People want to erase it off the map already. At the Australia, go to China already, So before I went, I got a call from this woman, and she says that she's my cousin. So please come visit her in Melbourne. And it's a very nice lady, but I don't have a cousin in Melbourne, She says, please come, please come. Finally, when I was there, so my host says, this lady keeps calling, you want to go over? I said, well, Australia's like a big continent, like how many hours is it to fly to a cousin that's not my cousin? She said, she's 10 minutes away. 10 minutes away, so I went. 10 minutes away, so I come in there, and I was about to explain to this nice lady that I'm not her cousin. Now she holds up a picture of my grandfather, and I have a picture of my house of that grandfather. I say, well, And at that moment, I have a flash in my mind. I remember my father telling me something about a cousin in Australia. And she begins to talk, and she starts telling me different stories about my uncles and my aunts, which I never knew before. And my father never spoke about them. They were all killed in the war. It was hard for him to speak about. She starts telling me about, you had an Uncle Moshe, and you had a sister Friedel, and she tells me about their lives and what kind of people they were. And I had tears running from my eyes. I feel like I'm reliving these people. Now, my father left from Lemberg, and he went to learn in Navardik, and he wound up in Vilna right before the war, where he got out through Shanghai. And he once told me that he snuck back to Lemberg, which is like I snuck into the Gaza Strip, or anybody interested in a free trip to Benghazi now or something like that's what it was like then. But that's what he did, and he never really told me why. He said he wanted to go to the Belzatish, and I'm sure he went to the Belzatish when he came back, but I always wondered if that was the reason that he went. He never told me the real reason he went. The real reason he went, she told me, is that he wanted to try to save his family. Also through Shanghai, because he thought he could procure visas for them. He said he came to his house. There was already a local Pole living in the house. Chased him with a crowbar. My father ran in and grabbed svarim that was still in the svarim shack. Ran out with it. He still have those svarim. He took it with him, and he found his parents in a bunker. And he asked them to come. And my Zayda said, "I can't. I'm too old. I'm too sick." So he told his brother Moshe, "You come." And his brother Moshe said, "I'm not leaving my parents alone." And my Zayda said, and so my father said, "Okay, so I'm staying also, so we'll all stay. Whatever happens, happens." And my grandfather said, "What, there shouldn't be any generations left?" So at that point, in a very, very difficult parting goodbye, my father said goodbye, and he went off with the Svarim. He says this cousin said that she's the one that financed the trip, and he made it back to Vilna in time to get onto the thing to Shanghai. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm sitting there, tears streaming from my eyes, and I'm saying, this is probably like 70 years since this story, and I never knew the story. So it must be my father met this, brother in Gan Eden, this Uncle Moshe, and said, Uncle Moshe said, you exist and your generations exist because of my Mesiras Nefesh. I think it's about time they hear the story. So my father says, okay, I'll tell him. How's he going to tell me? Right? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu picks me up. I think should I go to Australia? Should I not go to Australia for the Siyam HaShas? Should I go, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you know where you're going. Picks me up on my collar and takes me on the other side of the globe, puts me into that house and says, listen to this story now. I asked her if she knows when this uncle passed away. She said, yeah, beginning of Elul. I said, Kaddish, every day in Elul. I said, for whatever reason it was B'Sher. Do we know why we are in different places? We have no clue. Where we are, where we're supposed to be. That's where the Hagba is the other way around Simchas Torah. You don't know what you're accomplishing. You don't know why you're going through difficulties in life. You have no Mesiras Nefesh. You don't understand. So what are you complaining about if you don't know why you're here? So what do we say? We say, by Yeshava Brachas, we say, right, Yetzircha B'Gan Eden. So it's just like a Kadosh Baruch Hu put together Adam and Chava. They could have no tainas on the Schachter. Adam and Rishon could have no tainas on the Schachter. Schachter was Hashem. So every shidduch the Schachter is Hashem. And when were they in Gan Eden? Adam and Chava were in Gan Eden on Shabbos after the Chet Eitzadas, after the trouble started already. There's a famous story that the Chazayin Ish was sitting with the Talmidei Chachamim by Sheva Brachas. They heard singing and dancing. They went to look outside, and there was a Hachnasa Sefer Torah. But the Hachnasa Sefer Torah was from a group of people that did not identify themselves with the Yeshiva Sha'olam, and perhaps had different opinions or shittas, and there were major drifts and disagreements. So the issue was whether they should go down to the Hachnasa Sefer Torah. The Chazanish was Machriya, they should go down for the cover of the Torah. So everybody went down, except for one individual who's smarter than the Chazanish. He's not going down. So when they came back up, and they gave him the thing, he got the bracha of Asher Yotzar. Instead of saying Asher Yotzar es Adam etzalmo, he started saying Asher Yotzar es Adam b'chachma v'aravoy nikavim. It was laughing. Oh, slip up, right? So he starts again. Asher Yotzar es Adam b'chachma v'aravoy nikavim. And everyone's laughing 3 times in that. Until he was so flustered, he had to give the bracha to somebody else. Asher Yotzar es Adam b'chachma. But if a person's too smart, you're not mevatel yourself to the words of the Chachamim. So the Kedushas Levi says a very interesting thing. He says sometimes we say Yoitzer Aru Vayri Chayshech, sometimes we say Yotzar, like a Sheyotzer es Adam. Yoitzer is a much greater madrega. Yoitzer is a hakara that at this split second the Kadosh Baruch Hu was creating me, recreating me. I'll call Neshima the Neshima to Halakah. Asher Yotzar means he created me. I believe Hashem created me. It's not as high a level. Once you think you're smart, you go down from the level of Yoitzer Aravari Chayshach to Asher Yotzer Es Adam. Sheyotzer Es Adam B'Chachma. You're smart, it's a lower level. A higher level is Yoitzer Ar Ibayre Chayshach, that even the Chayshach is a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Ramesh Lev Sasava once went over to someone who was very broken, Matzah Yamtef. He had to go back home in a very difficult situation, and he had no parnasa, and there was so much sorrow in the house. He cried, he said, the last time I'm saying, Ata V'Chartani, Ata V'Chartanu. So, you know what he told him? He said, the Ata in the Ata Choinan Tanu by Havdalah is the same Ata as Ata V'Chartan. Same Ata, same Rebbeinu Shalom. Same Rebbeinu Shalom that brings you into Yom Tov is the one that carries you after Yom Tov. You connect to the Ata, then it's all the same. Then you keep on going. So what, he's a very interesting Balaturim. Because Baruch Hu asked Adam Rishon, why did he eat from the Eitz Hadas? So what did Adam Rishon say? He said, Isha shenasata imadi, she gave me mina eitz. So what the Balaturim says? She whacked me on the head with the eitz until I listened to what she said. Chava was very persuasive. Remember, this is your grandmother, right? The Targum Yonason says she outwitted me with her chacham. So you would think that they should have had the ultimate tainas on each other. I mean, they should have killed each other. I mean, could you imagine in a contemporary couple situation that doesn't have midos, after a Kadosh Baruch Hu both gave them their punishment and they walked out? You can imagine she turning to him and saying, I'm going to have to suffer with childbirth forever after because you had to eat that. I just said, my fault? Oh, it's my fault. I'm going to have to work it on the fault because you gave it to me. Right? Instead, what happens? It's not how they exactly did it. They said life is going to go on. So it says, it says afterwards, offer atav alofer tashiv. Then it says, v'yikra adam shem ishtei chava, ki haisa ein kol chai, v'yasal akim kas nesar levisha. So the Kehelis Yitzchak says like this. He says, b'zeh sepech atach alechem, offer atav alofer tashiv. They should have turned around. They should have killed each other. You see this electric bell? Do you realize what's going to happen to me now because you're my fault? You listen to me. You shouldn't have listened to me. Instead, Adam says, listen, this is what happened. Okay, we got to pick up the pieces from here. He turned to Chava and said, you are Aim Kol Chai. You're the mother of all living things. She's also technically the mother of all death. Right? He should have told her, oh, you should be in charge of all the Chevra Kadishas. I mean, you brought them to the world, right? Instead, Adam said, what happened? Happened, Aim Kol Chai. And there was an understanding between Adam and Chava that, listen, this is what happened. This is where we are. Gan Eden is over. Life has to go on. We have to build a world. And right away they went into Cain and Hevel and Saris, and they felt the pain of death. And they still said, we have to build a world. But Yasal Akim Kosnas Arvi Albisha. The Kadosh Baruch Hu saw in that the kiyum of the world. And as everything is Hashgacha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in this matziv. And that's how we say by Sheva Brachas Kisamecha Yitzircha B'Gan Eden. That if you want to look at the chesroinus of people after your spouse, you can always look at the chesroinus. If you want to believe the way your grandfather and grandmother Adam and Chava believed, then you are starting the process of rebuilding the world. You know where Barditchev was built? There was a Yid, Reb Lieber, who saved, I'm not going to go into the whole story now, it's late, who saved hundreds of Yidden when they was thrown out of Spain. And he was beaten, he was davening in the forest, he was beaten, his blood was all over the floor, and he managed to save himself. And at the end, the one who beat him was paralyzed, and the pirates ran to ask Mechila, was the pirates' son. So he told them, only on the condition that where my blood saturated into the earth, you're going to let Yidden build a Beis Medrash and then build permanent houses around and around. Until then, they only had permission to build in tents. And that Beis Medrash was Barditchev. That's where the Kedushas Levi went forth. You know? Chut in the mind. He said that whatever, the one he came home once after many, many years ago, after one of his babies were born, and there was a Geneva in his house. Everything was ripped. Everything was thrown all over the floor. Everything was like just... Somebody came in, just emptied all the drawers, looking for everything. So he said his initial reaction was, Baruch Hashem, have a healthy baby. You know? Baruch Hashem, God did this night. Okay. You know, you could say, hey, the night I have a simcha, you got to do this to me, everybody. You look at the world, a little bit of a different twist. Says he comes to the hospital, the wife says, you know, the doctor thought maybe there's an issue with the baby. It was nothing. But right there I said, steal my silver, steal everything, just it's not the baby. If we don't always get a choice. But when the silver is stolen, we have a choice. We can say, on this night, when I'm supposed to be happy, you got to do this to me, God. Or you can say, thank you for doing this. Thank you for giving me the message of turning right. Even though I don't understand what it is. But if you have the amenascha baleilos to run with it, then eventually we're going to be rewarded. And that's the true Shabbos Bereishit and the good Gebench Yar that is there to follow.
Like